Okay, so I have to tell you about this sound bath I went to in Venice because I still think about it more than almost anything else that has ever happened to me spiritually. And I say that as someone who does not typically use the word spiritual. Quick context if you've never done one. A sound bath is basically a group meditation, you could say. Someone, a healer, a shaman, I genuinely still don't know the correct term and I was too nervous to ask, plays these huge singing bowls and gongs in front of the room. You just lie there on your yoga mat with your eyes closed and listen. The sound washes over you for like 45 minutes until you're in this floaty, half asleep state. And they say it cleanses your cells. I have not researched that, not even slightly, but it does sound right to me. But I got there feeling very zen, very proud of myself for doing something wellness adjacent on a random weeknight. But before we even laid down, the shaman goes, "Let's start with the prayer circle, shall we?" And I'm like, oh no, we shall not. For the love of God. This is not another story about wanting to skip my turn in a card game, though, I promise. This is a whole new incident. You know what I mean, though, right? That very specific dread when someone asks you to be vulnerable out loud in front of strangers with zero warning. I've spent so much of my life managing that feeling quietly to myself, smiling through it. I sometimes forget that not everyone carries that same pressure the same way that I do or the same way that we do. And I know you get it. So that's when he goes, "Let's set an intention. What's one thing holding you back right now?" And I'm like, oh no, make it stop. I just wanted my cells cleansed. So I sat there panicking, drafting an answer in my head that sounded acceptable enough to say to 30 strangers instead of the actual real one. Because the real one just felt too plain to admit it, you know? Like, I know you've done this too. Edited yourself down to that version that sounds okay instead of the version that's actually true. The truth, the only sentence sitting on repeat inside my own head, was this embarrassingly simple thing: believing in myself. I could barely say it out loud in that room, and I can barely even say it right now. I remember thinking, oh God, this is so basic. Everyone here is about to say something so much deeper, like some generational trauma breakthrough, and I'm gonna sound like a fortune cookie. Then people actually start sharing. 30 people. We're going around the room, and almost every single one of them said some version of the exact same thing that I was going to say. Believing in themselves, trusting themselves, getting out of their own way. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, wait, I thought that was mine. I thought this was the one thing that made me different. It turned out to be the same thing, making everyone feel exactly the same way and terrorizing all of us. I've been sitting with that ever since. And it led me to a conclusion I believe the Dalai Lama has also arrived at, an original thought we apparently both share independently, which is this: life is suffering. I know that sounds dramatic for a sound bath, but I mean it in like a very undepressing way, I swear. Because I think that I've spent a lot of my life assuming that my inner world is just much more complicated, more private, more uniquely mine than it actually is. I catalog my own feelings very carefully, and I'm very proud of that. Like, I notice everything. I replay conversations. I know exactly which version of myself is going to show up in exactly which room. And somewhere in that habit, I think I convinced myself that being this aware of my own inner dialogue meant that I was alone in it. You know that feeling too, right? Being so deep inside of your own head that you forget anyone else could possibly be sharing the same thoughts. And that brings me to my first profound point. It doesn't matter how attractive or how put together someone might look. Nobody is immune to the suffering of life, yet for some reason we all think we're the only ones suffering. Please explain to me how this makes any sense. Because here's what's actually happening. You're expected to just go about your life completely silencing your inner dialogue, acting fine, looking fine, while you keep hitting the exact same walls over and over, unless you take some drastic step in a completely different direction. And the part that really gets me the most is that you don't even know you're doing it. So how are you supposed to stop something that you can't even see? Am I the only one noticing this is happening? Because what I've realized is that when you go through your whole life being a highly sensitive person and someone who is deeply emotional about everything, you realize that you never learned how to actually express this inner world without coming across as extremely dramatic about everything. So you just stop trying. And that in itself can be so isolating, because the one thing that might actually connect you to someone else, like saying the real thing you're feeling out loud, is the exact thing you've trained yourself not to do. So what I'm really saying is, if you're hot, you're on your own, and good luck. Nobody is checking on you because nobody thinks you need it. Now, this might sound a little unrelated, but I promise you it connects. Now, the same concept came back to me just the other day, but in a totally different setting. And I know I may have mentioned this before, but I've just been overcome by this feeling of being kind of bored with LA lately. Like, I know that sounds weird because I grew up here and a lot of people think LA is my whole thing and I'm all about it, and I kind of am, but I'm also kind of not. Something about living here just has not really been feeling super inspiring to me as of lately. So when I went to Nashville a month ago, I fell hard for East Nashville, like the way I always do. You know, the way that I get obsessed with something that I don't even really know that much about. Like, I had Zillow pulled up in the car and I was ready to start hitting open houses on day 2 of that trip. Then when I came back to LA, I met this girl in one of my yoga classes who was from a small town in Georgia. When she told me where she was from, she said it almost apologetically, like she was bracing for me to not know where it was or not even to care about it. But I got so excited. I had just gotten back from the South and I wanted to know everything. I pictured this cute little farmer's market, the green hills, the lake everyone probably grew up going to. And she just looked back at me and was like, no. I mean, we had all of that, but I couldn't wait to leave. It was the worst. And I totally understand that, except I probably don't really understand, and she probably thinks I definitely don't. Then I realized how I built this whole little world in my head about a place I'd never actually lived, based on nothing other than the girls I see on TikTok. And in that moment, I could just instantly feel something shift. It was this tiny, awkward little gap opening up between us, because my curiosity probably sounded to her like I was poking at something that she would rather not relive. So she pulled back and I backed off, and just like that, there was this whole divide sitting between us that honestly never needed to exist in the first place. And I realized that I've been on the other side of this moment so many times, and it just ends up keeping our world so small and we don't even realize it. Because what she was describing was that small town claustrophobia part. Wanting out, wanting something bigger, and that was probably the main reason why she left in the first place. And while I can understand that, even though I haven't actually lived that, what ends up sometimes happening, which can actually be so tragic, is that once you leave the small town and you get to the big city, you actually end up feeling so alone. Because it might seem like once you're there, no one even understands what you went through. Unless you meet other people who left their small town and moved to the big city, and then you can finally bond on that. But then you haven't actually really even met any of the people who are actually from the big city. And then you might actually end up ultimately feeling like you're never going to belong anywhere, especially when you're having a conversation with someone like me outside of a yoga studio. And I'm bringing this up because I think we just have it so completely backwards when it comes to understanding each other. Like, we treat our differences like they're this exclusive club where you either get in or you don't. And sometimes I just wish that there wasn't this velvet rope between us where you have to have matching resumes, same hometown, same heartbreak, same everything in order to understand each other and actually get along. When the truth is, there were just 2 girls standing outside of a yoga studio who probably would have had so much in common if we could have just gotten past that first entry point. And then there's this, of course. Maybe small towns don't actually come with all of the charm and community and all the things that I'm picturing when I'm totally an outsider. And maybe I won't move to Tennessee after all, because I ended up saying something to her like, oh, small towns totally suck. Like, thank God you're here. But I didn't actually mean that. I don't even know why I said that. Because maybe the lesson for me and her both, I'm not totally sure, is that we just need to learn how to be happy with where we actually are for once instead of just wanting to leave. That honestly might be my own fatal flaw if I'm being totally real with you. Does that actually sound familiar? Because you know what I mean? It's like that feeling of chasing this version of yourself who would exist if you were just in another place, instead of just being that version of yourself right here. Because no one wants to do that. It's definitely not as fun that way. But now, if I'm being totally honest, when I look back on that interaction and I replayed it in my head, I wish I could have done the whole thing so differently. Like, there she was, someone who left her small town to come to LA, moved here completely on her own to start a new life for herself. And I was focused on the farmer's market, when I should have just been there for her, looked at her and hugged her and been like, girl, you made it. You should be so proud of yourself. You have come such a far way. Like, what was that like for you? And I just kind of feel like I totally dropped the ball, if I'm being totally honest, that probably would have made her feel so much more understood and so much less alone. And if only I could go back and do that over again, I would have made it less about me and just more about her. Because that is a huge thing she went through, and it deserves to be celebrated. And these are the exact types of misunderstandings that arise all the time, and we have absolutely no idea they're happening. until you look back later and realize you could have done the whole thing completely differently. And here's what I actually think this is really all about underneath the Nashville conversation and the sound bath incident. For most of my life, I genuinely believe that I was the only one constantly suffering, or at least the only one quietly dreaming of being somewhere other than where I actually was. And this isn't meant in some grand comparing myself to the whole world way. I mean it in the much smaller way. Like inside my own friend group, or when I compare myself to the other students in my film classes who seemed so effortlessly smart and articulate, and I was sitting there severely dyslexic. I never did the reading. I spent every class praying the professor wouldn't call on me. I was genuinely picturing my own death as he moved down the row, and it never once occurred to me that half of that room was probably faking it. And I certainly would never know because I barely talked to any of them because I felt like such an outsider myself. And I know you've probably lived your own version of that lecture hall feeling like a million times, but I know you acted like really cool about it, obviously. Which brings me to exactly what I actually really want to talk about, because I think this is the piece that no one really explains properly. Which brings me back to us, because I know this is something only you will understand. So how do I actually say this? Being hot does not mean you don't suffer. Like, obviously, that's the whole point. But the part that I don't think gets said enough is that when you look good, like really good, so put together, that comes with a cost. It's not a huge one, don't get me wrong, but it can automatically make people assume that your life must be easy. And then nobody even actually asks you how you're doing. They are left to assume that life is always good for you because you look amazing, and nobody can actually see what's underneath all of it. And for the longest time, I thought that was the cruelest part, being so visible and so unseen at the same time. But here's what I actually think I might have just figured out. It's the thing I keep circling back to in bits and pieces across everything we ever talk about. So I think I'm just going to say it straight to you right now. That invisibility piece that I'm describing, like feeling totally alone in a sound bath despite everyone else actually being on the same page, it is a much bigger flaw in a much bigger system. The assumption that if you look fine, you must be fine, which is just not true at all. But it can actually be huge leverage if you know how to use it. Because basically, if you look at it like this, nobody assuming you're struggling doesn't mean you have to correct them. It actually just means that you get to move through your life without your hard days written all over your face, without everyone deciding they know your story before you've even told it. And the girls who want to seem more magnetic, more irresistible, more confident in every room, now we're speaking my language. They might think the answer is just hiding that inner world completely, because that's definitely what I've always thought. Like you're just performing your own version of the cool girl so nobody ever has to really get close enough to see the real you. But that's not it, like not entirely. The actual formula is knowing when to let someone in and when to let the mystery do the work for you. When you're the cool girl, you get to choose the reveal. You get to make sure the setting calls for it. You're not just going to open yourself up to all the wrong people at all the wrong times. Knowing that is your whole advantage, and almost nobody knows how to actually use it correctly. And all of this is really just the same conversation about the whole hero's journey thing that I keep coming back to, specifically the part that I think I rushed through last time, which is the best part, the fatal flaw. It's the actual engine of any story. It's the reason the character does anything at all. And it's the missing link. It's the only thing she can never fully see about herself. Because you're almost never fully aware of your own fatal flaw. Maybe some tiny part of you suspects it, but you don't know how to actually fix it. Because it's impossible. You can't see yourself that objectively. It just doesn't work like that. So that leaves you with two options. You can either spend your whole life quietly fighting against your fatal flaw, or you can slowly learn how to turn it into the exact thing that makes you magnetic, instead of the thing that's running the whole show in the background behind the scenes. And if you're wondering, how do I have so much time on my hands to think about these deep, complex thoughts? I will tell you my secret. I actually, especially as of lately, have been going on my morning walks in complete silence, with no music, no podcast, no headphones, just me and my own thoughts for 10,000 steps. And that's when I had this bright idea that I would start trying to figure out what everyone else's fatal flaw is. I would never tell that to a single person, though. That feels like a very fast way to lose every friendship I've ever had. But coming up with this list of flaws actually made me feel a little bit less alone, because I've realized that nobody's flaw is really as bad as they think it is. We all just assume we're the only one carrying ours around. And I know you do this too. Quietly deciding that your specific flaw is much worse or much weirder than everyone else's, so you never share it. You know, we all do it. Even Murphy has a fatal flaw, and I mean that completely seriously. My dog is convinced that she is a deprived little orphan. She is only fed twice a day and starving at all times, all despite having 2 loving parents who are doting on her every move and getting fresh chicken for lunch every single day, like a tiny little blonde heiress. But it is never enough for her. She sits and stares at her treat drawer like she's there to collect, regardless of how much she's already gotten that day. Her flaw is that she can never get enough. She simply does not have the concept. So I come to you with this list because I think everyone fits somewhere inside it. Like, you'll probably immediately know which flaw is yours. But I already told you mine during the whole share circle thing, but unfortunately, I do relate to all of them. It really just depends on the day. So here's the list, starting with the control girl. This is the girl who needs to know how everything ends before it even starts. She has the plan, the backup plan, and then the backup plan for the backup plan. Somewhere she learned that things fall apart if she's not the one steering. And the lesson for her is that some things are only good if you can't see the ending yet. So you've just got to let go, girl. It's all going to work out for you. Then there's the performer. She's incredible in a room. She's funny, she's warm, she's exactly what everyone needs her to be. She's the one that you're definitely going to invite as your +1 because you're going to have way more fun with her. But her fatal flaw is that nobody has ever really met the real her, the actual her. So the lesson in there is that the right people are never going to leave her when they meet the real version. In fact, they're dying for that side of her to come out. She's just the only one who's holding it back. Then there's the fixer. She's the friend everyone calls at midnight, and she's there for you even if it's quietly draining her. She's down to fix everyone's problems except her own. The lesson is probably that she needs to let someone take care of her for once. She is learning that voicing her own needs does not mean she's a problem. Then there's the guarded one. She keeps everyone slightly at an arm's length, myself extremely included. Closeness to her has come at a cost sometime before, so distance just feels a lot safer for her. The lesson here is that the version of herself that finally lets someone all the way in doesn't mean she's too much, and it doesn't mean she's weak or lame or anything like that. She just needs a reframe on how she sees herself. Then we have the perfectionist. She finishes the thing and then immediately starts finding what's wrong with it, instead of just sitting in it for even 10 minutes. She has to get everything done perfectly before she can relax, and she never gets to the relaxing part. The lesson is that she's allowed to just be proud of something, full stop. It's okay to enjoy your hard work and let the dishes pile up in the sink for a few hours. Like, you're going to be okay. And then lastly, the avoider. She would rather leave her own body than have a hard conversation. She'll say she's fine, she'll change the subject, and she'll wait it out. For her, keeping the peace has always felt safer than actual confrontation or even communication at all, which is always at her own expense. The lesson is that avoiding something doesn't make it disappear. It just means that you're holding everything alone at 2 a.m., which is so much worse when you think about it. Now that I've gone through all of them, I feel like you are probably seeing yourself in a lot of them too, which I totally get because you're multidimensional. I feel that. I barely know which one I am on some days. It honestly fluctuates pretty regularly. But I wanted to bring all of this to you because I spent so long assuming that no one else was going through these things and it was all just existing quietly in my own head, and that these things were too small or too strange or too specific to ever say to anyone. And the sound bath and the potential Nashville move that is probably not happening, don't freak out. And this whole rabbit hole thing that I went down with, like, the fatal flaws. I kind of lost myself back there. But when you think about it, it's really all teaching you the same thing. It's that saying that quiet internal thing out loud is usually how you find out that it was never just you. Because once you actually find out your fatal flaw, that's when you ultimately become even hotter, even smarter, even funnier. Maybe even a little bit more spiritual. But now there's only one thing left. All you have to do is just promise me that you will use your new powers for good, not evil. Except sometimes evil, if you have to. Anyways, we will talk later. Love you. Bye.